third hour of our program. On the line with us is our buddy Dean Obeidallah, my colleague. He's the host of the Dean Obeidallah Show, weekdays 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Sirius XM Progress Channel 127. He's a contributor to MSNBC Daily and Salon.com. His Substack newsletter, which you must subscribe to, it's free. It's called The Dean's Report, and you can deanofradio.com, deanobeidallah.substack.com, or just go to Substack and plug in Dean's Report, and it'll pop right up. Also on Twitter, Dean Obeidallah, and of course at Sirius or SXM Progress, the Progress channel for Sirius XM. Dean, welcome back to the program. I understand the New York Times has been trash talking you.
Well, the New York Times wrote an article lumping me in with left-wing and right-wing conspiracists talking about the election and the idea that the lack of votes from 2020 is causing these conspiracy theories. And that's not at all what I wrote in my tweet. And in the article, the reporter said he had reached out to me, and then I questioned that, and then sure enough, it was in my spam. He did. But what I wrote was very responsible, and it continues to be responsible. People should ask questions. Donald Trump is a convicted felon. He's convicted for cheating in the 2016 campaign. That wasn't about hush money to cover up an affair. As Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan DA, said, that case was about presidential corruption in a campaign. Donald Trump was charged with felonies for, after the 2020 election, attempting to cheat in that election. Donald Trump was running to stay out of jail, and even more motive to cheat in the 2024 election. Not asking questions makes you sheep. Critical thinking skills demand you ask questions. It also demands you ask for credible, objective evidence. And that I haven't seen yet. But asking questions, that's what we should do as patriotic Americans.
Amen. Amen. So these days, I mean, you know, it's been a couple of days since your tweet, which the New York Times wildly exaggerated and took out of context, as they are wont to do in liberals. What questions do you have these days?
Well, look, I wrote my article for Substack today about, still up today on the front page, about you're not an election denier if you ask if convicted felon Donald Trump cheated in this election. So people are asking questions. They called my show nonstop. And since day one, my response has been the same. And as a formal trial lawyer, I request that you provide me some credible, objective evidence. People send me theories. I go, that's great. Now the burden's on you to find evidence to support your theory. I'm not your investigator. I'm happy to chat with you about it. If you send me things, we can talk about it. But at the end of the day, people who did cite theories and send them to me, they noted they didn't have evidence of anything widespread. That doesn't mean you shouldn't look for it. Doesn't mean DHS shouldn't have a press conference to answer questions that people have that's gone viral. Was Elon Musk involved somehow in hacking into the voting system? People thought that's true. It looks completely untrue. But wouldn't it be good, Tom, if DHS got ahead of the curve, the Department of Homeland Security, and had a press conference after every presidential election and answer the questions that people are saying online to give more confidence? And yeah, you won't dissuade everyone to believe in it, but people who come at this in good faith will be like, okay, I see that's a pretty reasonable answer, and I get it. We're going to move on. We're going to win this election based on policy. But do not stop questioning until, if you can't find proof, then we have to move on. But don't stop questioning in the first week after an election.
Yeah. The thing that I would love to see is the statistics that I would love to see is what was the consequence of the Husted case before the Supreme Court in 2018 when John Husted, or Husted, however he says it, he's the Secretary of State for Ohio, and he wanted to aggressively purge from the voting rolls black people in Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus because using the rationale that they hadn't voted in the previous election. And he was not purging the entire state. This was fairly selective, if my recollection is accurate. And it may not be, so double check that. But he wanted to, you know, he was going after these people. And it was a violation of the Voting Rights Act. And the 5 Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, that's fine. If you're purging people, you can go ahead and do that. And so the purge is just nationwide in states where you had Republican secretaries of states just went ballistic. I mean, I've cited the numbers before. They're in my book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, but I've also written about them several times. In fact, John Paul Stevens? No. I forget who wrote the dissent, but in one of the dissents in that Husted case, he pointed out that they had, you know, that on average something like 8% of Americans move every year, and that in Ohio, Husted was proposing to purge over 20% of the people from some of these cities, on the premise that they had moved, and that's why they hadn't voted in the last election. And so, number one, I want to know how many people were removed from the voter rolls in each one of these states, and nationwide. I'd like to see it for all 50 states. It's data that should be the federal government should be collecting, and they're not, to the best of my knowledge, because if they are, I can't find it anywhere. And number two, I want to know what percentage of votes were disqualified, people who voted, because we know that True the Vote and the Republican Party were trying to recruit 100,000 people to be poll watchers in largely Democratic districts where they would oversee the counting of mail-in ballots and absentee ballots, looking for strict signature matching, where they could object and say, oh, no, that signature doesn't match. And then those ballots either get thrown out or they get thrown into the provisional ballot stack, where you've got to show up physically at the and Greg Palast has documented just a crap load of these down in Georgia. I mean, hundreds of thousands of them, or thousands of them, certainly. And again, we don't have any reliable numbers on these, but my best guess is it's going to be something on the order of around 10 million people, based on what we've seen in the past. And those kind of numbers could be decisive. So, inquiring minds want to know, Dean. And these are processes that are entirely legal right now because of the Supreme Court.
Republicans don't have to break the law to rig elections. That's the remarkable thing. They have the Supreme Court legalizing something that should never be permitted. In fact, the Supreme Court, just weeks before the election, agreed with the Republicans that in Virginia, 1,600 people, that wasn't a lot, but 1,600 could be disenfranchised for lack of proof of citizenship. And generally, the Supreme Court never decides things that close to an election because it didn't give people enough time if they were actually just caught up in that and they were here, they were valid to vote. And so they didn't care. The rules don't matter anymore, Tom. So the odd thing, Donald Trump cheated in 2020. If he tried not to, if he didn't break the law, perhaps Republicans would have saved him through their legal machinations. And that failed. They went through court. So look, here's where we are right now. And I think Elon Musk, there are a lot of questions about Elon Musk, especially as I note in my article. There was a DOJ criminal investigation into Elon Musk. It wasn't a secret. It was written about in 2023. And for his activities with getting benefits and perks from his company and not reporting it properly and maybe misleading shareholders, which could rise the level of a crime. Well, he figured out a way how to shut that down. Give Donald Trump and invest in Donald Trump $100 million, and the DOJ will not continue that investigation. 100% they won't, nor the workers' investigation into racial discrimination or workplace injuries, his anti-union activities, all of that. He figured out the smartest way, and we're back in the Gilded Age, Tom, where the oligarchs are just buying off presidents, and Trump is a peanut, a president name only, and he's happy to be. He'll go play golf, and he'll let the oligarchs run things with Stephen Miller. Yeah,
he was looking at going to prison, and he's not anymore. And as you correctly point out, so was Elon Musk, and he's almost certainly not any longer. So what's your advice to your listeners, Dean? How to deal with all this?
On life and life in general, just about relationships, about what time, about
how to deal with what's coming, with the coming Trump neo-fascist administration.
Well, when you put it that way, it sounds. Look, I think right now people should recharge. I think they should relax. I had my sister on, who's a psychologist, last week on the show on Thursday, giving people advice. I really do believe that we've been through a trauma, all of us collectively. Yeah. No joke, it really is. And to deal with that, and to take a little time off. If you're going to take time, here's the time. It's now. But we have to soon regroup and be ready. We need a more powerful resistance going forward, Tom. I think one that's not just about resisting Trump, but also about policies going forward. And I would recommend economic populism for us as Democrats to embrace wholeheartedly. Yeah. That we're going to be there fighting for the middle class, the lower class, for the people of this country. So it's not just resistance. So the former Trumpers, the never Trumpers who are really conservatives, are not going to be a part of this. It's going to be Democrats leading the resistance, but one not just opposing Trump, but with an affirmative vision about what our nation should be in terms of policy. And I'm really committed to that. And I'm hoping listeners and everyone, we will join in that fight going forward on policy to be transformative. It's time to be transformative, Tom. Moving things around the edges is BS. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I'm with you. I grew up in Michigan, and of course we studied unions when I was in elementary school. I mean, literally fifth grade civics, right? And we studied tariffs. And Biden raised tariffs on steel from 7.5 to 25%. He raised tariffs on semiconductors from 25 to 50%. He raised tariffs on electric vehicles from 25% to 100%. He raised tariffs on EV batteries from 7.5 to 25%. Also battery parts, graphite and permanent magnets from 0 to 25%, critical minerals 0 to 25%, solar cells 25 to 50%, syringes and needles 0 to 50%, face masks 0 to 25%, rubber and surgical gloves 25%, and ship-to-shore cranes 0 to 25%. I don't think any Americans know that, and I think Trump's message on tariffs was the main thing that helped him win. People in the Rust Belt states know what the hell a tariff is. What say you, Dean?
I think there are people who paid attention to different things about Donald Trump. I don't think everyone who voted for Trump did so for the racism and the sexism. There's a big chunk of that, but not all of them. I think, yes, some gravitated to that economic issue. Others, inflation, and it's driving them crazy, and that they want just a change in it. But, Tom, the reality, Trump will drive us into a recession. The worst part is he'll tell his supporters, no, we're not in a recession. They're lying. And they will believe him even if they're out of a job. That's what we're dealing with right now. There's no reality. There's zero doubt in a few years from now, we're not going to have unemployment at the low rate we're having now with wages climbing and prices are a little higher. We'll have a higher inflation.
Yeah, isn't it amazing that 74% of Republicans believe we're in a recession right now? I mean, isn't that a testimonial to the right-wing bubble?
Sure. And Donald Trump has led that. So when we're actually in a recession or even a depression, Trump will say we're not, and his supporters answer that same question will tell you, economy's booming. I know I'm out of work. I lost my house. I live under a bridge. But Trump told me it's great, and they will repeat it. That's what a fascist movement is. It's the leader is infallible. Whatever they say becomes dogma. It is the religious. It's a religion.
Amen. Amen. The great Dean Obeidallah. Be sure to check out his newsletter, The Dean's Report, deanobeidallah.substack.com, or just get over to Substack and plug in Dean's Report. It'll pop right up. Dean, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thanks, my friend. Take care.
Yeah, good talking to you. We'll be back on the other side of this break. I'll be back with you. Stay with us.